Food and Beverage Magazine Live, bringing food and beverage to life. With your hosts, James Beard Award winner Jennifer English and Food and Beverage Magazine publisher Michael Politz. Featuring leaders in the hospitality, branded food and beverage, and CPG industries, many of whom are Jennifer and Michael's friends in the business. For an informal and informative conversation where friends in the business share the latest intel, ideas, and best practices. Live, juicy inside scoop from the tastemakers, newsmakers, bread bakers, drink shakers, spoon lickers, clam diggers, farms, foodies, and friends of the food and beverage magazine world. Here are your hosts, Jennifer English and Michael Politz.
Wait. Oh boy. What is that?
It's crack. This is literally, somebody was so lovely. About 3 weeks ago, we talked to an extraordinary guy whose company is called Baksu.
Baksu.com. Baksu.
Yeah, and on the inside of the box, it says happy snacking. Okay.
Sometimes I feel like I'm Ed McMahon to you, John.
It's a curated subscription box of Japanese snacks. And again, I've had a few Japanese snacks, and one I like as much as the next. But I've yet to have the thing that was mind-alteringly delicious and irresistible, and I have now.
You know what? Why don't you write? There you go. There's your answer. Write your article on that. Okay. There's your answer. That was the question. Here's the answer. What's that?
This is the magazine that comes with it.
You know what it says on the front there in Japanese?
It is seasons, right?
It says Boyajian olive oils. That's what it says on the Japanese.
Yes, but I'm going to tell you something. We can talk about this more, but I just wanted to tell you that these are the Funwari Meijin Mochi Puffs.
Can I tell you that Funwari is a dirty word? Now we're going to get thrown off of YouTube.
They're addictive. They're just addictive. Flat out, plain old-fashioned addictive. And the reason I'm talking about them before our next guest and first and only guest today comes on is because there's a similarity. There are people who have literally invented new categories, and curated boxes and subscription boxes is nothing new. But taking us to another part of the world with these extraordinary snacks and teaching us about the best of something, there's a lot of something new about Baksu. But when we do this today, we're actually talking to someone who has literally created a brand new category of food. Michael, do you have any olive oil in your house?
Of course I have olive oil in my house. Extra virgin.
Right. Do you have any flavored oils or balsamic vinegar or flavored vinegars in your house?
I love flavored balsamic vinegar. It's my all-time favorite. I love fig. For some reason, there's something about the fig balsamic vinegar that's mind-boggling. But oils, I like to have a little oils flavor every once in a while. You really got to be careful. When you cook like we do, you got to use the right.
Right.
It also keeps you young.
There are
so this guy that's coming on is from Massachusetts. He actually go ahead. He was friends with Paul Revere. But you couldn't tell. That's how young he is.
He was friends with Julia Child. Julia Child loved his stuff. John Boyajian is a fantastic food entrepreneur. And we're going to talk about how he revolutionized whatever's in your home right now. You can draw a direct line back to John Boyajian because he was the first to create flavored oils. And he became the king because he does garlic oils and lemon oils and herb oils, not the kind that you see in bottles with, for decorative purposes. These are the real deal used by the best chefs in the world. It is widely acknowledged that John Boyajian single-handedly practically created this category alongside his main business at the time, or maybe this was the second business or the main business. We'll get to the history of that in a minute. But John also used to be a purveyor of caviar. And the caviar industry changed substantially. But back in the day, when he started his business, the specialty food business was basically those imported specialty products from around the world. Very few of them were being made here in the United States. There were very few food entrepreneurs at that time. And fast forward to today, and the entire game has changed and shifted. One of the people we have to thank for that is John Boyajian, one of the connoisseurs who helped get us and lift us all up here to where we are now in the food world. From the chef side to the consumer side, there's not a person on Food Network that doesn't love his stuff. There isn't a person who cooks today that isn't using one of these fantastic flavored oils or flavored vinegars that can't say thank you to John Boyajian. So we're going to do it for them. We're going to welcome him. And what an honor it is. He's the Robert Mondavi of flavored oils. He's the king who invented the category. He is, of course, my friend John Boyajian. As a native Bostonian, he was one of the guys who, like, the food nerds that we were, there weren't that many of us, enough to sustain a business, but not like today. So it's a real treat to welcome an old friend back and onto the show. Hi, John.
Hi, thank you so much. And it's a real treat to be on your show.
Talk a little bit about Boyajian historically and how you started the company.
That's quite a story. Historically, you know, the honest answer is the company started as an accident. It was really an accident. Every product that we created came to be as a commercial product accidentally. I started originally in business as a way to make money for graduate school, and started out in the lobster business. Being from the Boston area, I knew a little bit about the lobster business. Started out in the lobster business this way. I have family in France and was visiting a cousin in Paris back in 1978, I think it was. And he had a friend of his from Belgium over for dinner who was in the produce business. He was a produce importer. And he used to bring in fruits and vegetables from the United States as well as other parts of the world. And as we were talking over dinner, he said, "Oh, you're from Boston. There's a lot of lobster in Boston." I said, "Yeah, there is." He said, "Well, I'm really interested in bringing lobster in. Maybe you can help me." So I'll make a long story short. We made an agreement. I found some lobster for him. He ordered 400 pounds of essentially chicken lobsters. I found out how to ship it over to him, and he gave me 25 cents a pound for my trouble, and I made $100 for doing nothing. I thought, wow, this is great.
You didn't have to take physical possession of the lobsters. You didn't have to do anything. You kind of brokered the deal.
So we got to a point where we were actually packing the lobsters and putting them on the plane and shipping them over. And that's, and so it grew, that business grew. And in 1980, I was sent a newspaper article by a friend of mine's grandmother. I'm Armenian. And she sent me this newspaper article from an Armenian newspaper about this very well-known Armenian family named Petrosian in Paris. And they were and still are, the biggest name in caviar and all of the different, luxury food products in Europe. So I gave them a call and said, "You want to talk about lobster?" And they said, "Sure." Well, they weren't interested in lobster, but they liked me and wanted to know ultimately if I'd like to work with them in the United States. And they actually offered me an opportunity to move to New York City and learn the caviar business. I still had one foot in school and one foot in business. Wasn't sure what I was going to do, so I really didn't want to move to New York. So instead, I said, "Well, I really don't want to move to New York, but I'll distribute your caviar in the Boston area. Why don't you teach me the caviar business?" So they did, and that's how it started. And we had I say we, there were two of us and then three of us working in this little crammed area, this office in South Boston. Now it's called the Seaport District. Back then it was.
Now it's fancy.
And now it's really fancy. Back then it was anything but fancy. We had sublet 800 square feet of space from an artist's co-op, and to do our business out of. And when we ran out of space, we rented about a 1,500 square foot space, an old drugstore on the street level right on the Cambridge Belmont line, about a mile out of Harvard Square. And the Boston Globe mistakenly wrote that we'd opened a retail store. So the story broke just before Thanksgiving, and people started coming in, and we couldn't believe all the people that were coming in. I said, "Well, what else can we sell these people?" And one of the first things I thought of was garlic oil. Being Armenian, we use olive oil for everything. We use butter for Christmas and Easter holiday desserts, but other than that, we use olive oil for everything, especially I mean, really, for everything. I was going to say, especially for pilaf, but we do use butter in our pilaf, but we use olive oil in our pilaf as well. However, I digress. My grandparents used to make garlic oil fresh from the garden when we were kids. They'd make garlic oil, they'd make basil oil, we called it red pepper oil, dill oil. So I said, let's make garlic oil. So I bought a pound of garlic from the Star Market down the street, got a gallon of olive oil, made some garlic oil, put it up in bottles with some handmade labels, and that's how it started. And
you sold out, and you made more, and it was a hit.
Oh, we made more. People got angry with us because they'd say, I came in and there was no more garlic oil. We saved some bottles for me, and they'd come by and the bottles would be gone. We'd make 12 bottles at a time, then 24 bottles at a time. I remember the first time we brought in a 55-gallon drum, we thought we'd really arrived. It was pretty funny. And what happened, the reason the way we became commercially successful with our oil was, it was 1989, 1990, there was a recession going on. And I said, you know what, we need to do something else. So we have to find a bigger market for our products. And so we sent our garlic oil around we sent a sample to Williams Sonoma, a sample to the then chef's catalog, a sample to the just opening King Arthur Baker's catalog. And I knew I wasn't going to hear from any of them. And they all called back and they said, wow, we love this. Where can we get more? And that's how it started.
And literally, Michael, this is a category that today is a huge category.
No, I understand this. Like the way he started back at 1722, I started the same thing. No, that's how I started. I used to own a floral wholesale company, right? And it all started because I sold. One guy introduced me to roses, right? And he said, hey, if you buy this for $5, you could break it apart and sell them for make $40, just make $35, right? And you get one thing, and then another, and you just build this. Eventually, I had huge warehouses, multiple of them, and you had giant walk-in coolers, and you sold everything, right? And I love the way he did it, because if I had the knowledge that he had, I would have done the same thing. I don't think anyone was going to be buying matzo ball soup out of the containers down the board. So I figured the flowers were the good thing, right, Jennifer?
Yeah.
And, you would get standing orders, and you would say, oh, this hotel's never going to use us, never going to. And the next thing you get these monster orders. And because you go in, John, you go in and you're like, you expect defeat. So you sort of give them the best deal. You tell them what it is. You don't go in all like salivating, and then they want to work with you. You don't over worry about it, right? Like everybody else does in the world, right?
Part of the reason we're excited to have John on the show today, Michael, is that in this time of the COVID crisis, entrepreneurs are going to be called upon to tap back into, as restaurant operators, as consumer brands, as small food companies, and potential behemoths and category changers. Everyone's going to get called upon to become reignited and resparked in their passion. And I love you and John talking about your early days as entrepreneurs, because I want you to both, and John, I'm going to let you take a shot at this first. Talk a bit, because it sounds, when you tell me this story, this doesn't sound like a Harvard Business School business plan that you wrote that you executed to the T. And not everybody's going to believe it, but some of the most big success can come from the serendipity and the magic of just try it. Talk about how, did you really start with a business plan, or did you just, was it just that easy success for you?
Easy, John. She says easy.
There was no business plan. I wish there had been a business plan, but then again, had there been a business plan, I probably wouldn't have done this. Mm-hmm. It certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't a business savvy decision to make in the beginning, but no, it was something that was strictly born from passion. And in fact, I was in graduate school not for business, but actually for education and community development.
Oh wow!
So it really was it was from passion. I grew up with food all around me. Food is love. You fall off your bicycle and you skin your knee. Come on, I'll give you something to eat. That kind of thing. And generations of tradition of grandmothers and great grandmothers and aunts making food, and grandfathers and uncles at the grill grilling lamb. You pick all these things up and you put the different pieces together and you say, yeah, this will work. If I liked it, other people are going to like it, or at least that was the hope.
John, take us back.
Worked.
Take us back to the 1980s when you were having these early successes at the Belmont location. Take us back to that food world. Julia Child was by now a national treasure and a global figure, and she lived literally down the street. And there were young chefs coming up whose names we've come to know very well, like Todd English. Tell people about what the food world was like then.
The food world was new. It was exciting. At least I can only speak for the Boston area at the time. I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew what was going on in New York and San Francisco and LA and Chicago, because I really didn't, except for the fact that I sold lobsters to some of the bigger restaurant chains. They were sort of the buttoned up seafood chains that weren't particularly exciting anyway. But in the Boston area, first of all, we had Julia Child, who was a real treasure. She was just a wonderful treasure. And aside from being, an incredibly well-known and loved personality, she was a real supporter of the food scene in Boston. She would frequent the restaurants. She would talk to the chefs. She would talk to the restaurant owners. She'd be encouraging. She'd ask questions, and she really cared. And I met Julia when she was doing her last big book. I think it's called The Way to Cook. Mm-hmm. And she needed some product for photos. And so she called me up one day, and her voice is just so iconic. I almost thought somebody was playing a joke on me. It was her, and she wanted to know if she could get, at that time she wanted to get some foie gras, and she did some foie gras for a photo shoot. So we met, we really hit it off, and became great friends. But some of the other names back then, Monsef Medeb, who I think really deserves. He deserves special mention because he was the first one to take a shot. He was the first one to go out of the box, at least in my memory, Jennifer. Maybe you can think of somebody else, but
when
really
you say out of the box, you've got that box is that white tablecloth restaurant box.
Right. Traditionally French, traditionally European, not pushing the envelope really. The box was, escargots and internados of beef for two and stuff like that. Monsef created a new menu every day.
Yeah.
He was cooking. He had embraced Nouvelle cuisine because that was big at the time in Boston in the early 80s, and just did some really outlandish stuff. Nobody had ever seen rare duck breast before in Boston. If you got a breast of squab and it came rare, you'd go, is this bird or is this beef, or did they not cook it enough, and that kind of stuff. And you learned, you just discovered stuff that was just delicious and incredible. But then coming up behind Monsef were people like Jasper White and Lydia Shire and Jody Adams.
And then these are the names that began.
Bob Kincaid. I'm sorry?
Then the Hammersleys and Todd English and Barbara Lynch.
Exactly. I mean, Barbara Lynch worked with Todd and then went out on her own. Look what she's done. I mean, she's just, how do you even begin to describe what she's done? She's just so spectacular. But there's so many wonderful people in the Boston food scene. And I could sit here and just keep on reeling off names for the next 10 minutes. There are so many talented people, and they're such good people. They share with each other. There was a real sense of community. It was a great sense of community.
That's a pattern. That's a pattern. John, we hear that. We hear when people talk about the old days, not that old, but the beginning, right? It's a sense of community, right, Jennifer? We hear that. And now I see that happening again. I'm in Vegas, and I see that. I saw Todd the other day at a local Vegas restaurant, talking to them with those chefs. Well, I will tell you this, John. 14, 15 years ago when Todd was here, he would be going to Olives, he would hang out and do his thing, and then he would leave. Now, all of a sudden, everyone's sort of back in this mix with each other, helping each other. Jennifer, how do you feel about this?
It's absolutely true. And one of the things that's important to remember is when Julia Child was happening, there was also a woman named Joyce Chen. She is, to my mind, as influential as any of the women that came subsequently, Susanna Fu, Anita Lowe. There are incredible restaurateurs who today, because they don't have a show on Food Network today, don't necessarily get the acclaim that they had earned and deserved, because we don't focus as much on that history. Women in general were not as acclaimed as some of the men at that time. But you have to remember that there were houses that were famous for being the place, and it was not as chef driven. Places like the Lockover, places like Durgan Park.
That's right.
Or we could even talk about a place like the Ritz-Carlton. And that was still one of the most extraordinary places on the planet. It's where I learned about fancy, but I was, a young person. We had so much, and it's very difficult to explain how important Boston was to our national food story and scene today, but in part because we also had the Boston Seafood Festival, which was one of the world's most widely respected seafood shows, industry shows. We had the Boston Food and Wine Festival. The Boston Wine Festival was one of the earliest festivals in the country. We have to point out the fact that things like King Arthur Flour, Stonewall Kitchens, things like we have so much that originates out of the New England area. Pepperidge Farm came out of Connecticut. We just had this sense of entrepreneurship and food awakening. And there's just so much richness that comes out of New England. And one of those things is the whole specialty food category. And John, you played a huge role. You didn't know that it was specialty food at the time. How did you align with the specialty food industry, producers of the fancy food show in the summer and the winter?
That's a really good question. I hadn't thought about it until this very moment. Actually, there used to be a New England food service show in Boston every spring, and we were approached by the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture regarding renting some space there, and so we did, and got to know the people in the specialty foods program at the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture. They wasn't called the Specialty Foods Program at the time, but it's essentially what it was. What they were doing is they were looking for small entrepreneurial driven food companies that were producing special things that were new, things that spoke to a different sense, and bringing us all together as a group, and sort of helping us get some exposure, helping us helping us to afford space at the New York Fancy Food Show and later at the San Francisco Fancy Food Show. And that's really how that started. And I remember we did our first Fancy Food Show in New York, I believe it was in 1992 or 93. And that's when I really, for the first time, saw that there was a big specialty food world out there. There was a huge market dedicated to specialty foods.
Not long after that, the caviar industry changed. And the core component of your business and that exquisite pressed caviar that I just still swoon over when I tell you when I'm dying, bring me some of that, please.
So you're saying, Jennifer, date caviar night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now we know how to get to your heart.
You absolutely positively. The lobster roll.
I have little tins right now. I have 2 little tins of imperial caviar in my refrigerator.
Don't tell me.
Well, the caviar industry did change, and it's really kind of sad what happened. The caviar industry was very strong up until the breakup of the Soviet Union.
Right.
And up until that time, the Soviet Union and Iran controlled the true caviar market, because true caviar was really caviar, the eggs of sturgeon that only came from species in the Caspian Sea. And Iran and the Soviet Union controlled the Caspian Sea. And after the breakup of the Soviet Union, it was sort of a free-for-all in the former Soviet states.
Right.
There were no limits, or there were no regulations put on fishing. There were no limits put on fishing. There were no quotas. A lot of the environmental regulations had gone south, had gone the way of the dodo bird, if you will. So there was an awful lot of pollution that took place, a lot of overfishing that took place, and in a very, very short period of time, the sturgeon population in the Caspian Sea was in danger. And it was ultimately added to the what is called the CITES list, the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species list. And we saw it by 2004. We saw it was happening. I did not want to be involved with it anymore. I said, you know what, this is unsustainable. It's not right. We're out of here. And a year later, they closed the Caspian Sea, and that was it. Since that time, there have been a lot of people raising sturgeon in other parts of the world, some with success, some with not a lot of success. Some of the product's pretty good. An awful lot of it's not very good. It became very, very expensive, and it's certainly not the caviar of old. It's really kind of too bad. Will we see it come back in our lifetime? Not sure.
Jennifer, I always had my caviar at the Beverage at the front of Bellagio. You know what I mean? That's where I would sit and caviar all day. But that was in 2002 and 3 and 4, and then you're right. Hit the wall.
Right. And everything
changed. They even shut down they don't even do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's fast forward. Chefs began to discover your oils, the celebrated chefs, the shows, the magazines. You got a tremendous amount of publicity, and you've grown the line expansively into a number of categories. Today, you are still not only the pioneer, but one of the leaders in terms of quality of flavored oils. Talk a little bit about your product line today. What's the Boyajian line like today?
The Boyajian line today is pretty much three different lines. We have a line of naturally infused olive oils. By naturally infused, I mean we don't use any flavors, we don't use any extracts, natural or otherwise. When we make garlic oil, we take 1 to 2 tons of fresh California garlic, we crush it, and in the oil it goes. We're the only company in the United States that does it that way. I'm guessing because the efforts that we have to go to make sure that to ensure food safety,
right,
are really extraordinary. I don't think most people would want to go through that. The record keeping is really laborious. The monitoring that we get from Global Food Safety Initiative and from the FDA is extensive, but it's worth it for us. It creates a beautiful product. You talk about a business plan. I think most business plans would say it doesn't make any sense to take a product that other people can make in a day that takes us 8 weeks to make. That's what makes us different as far as our infused oils are concerned, and we just keep on adding to the number of different kinds of infusions that we do. Our biggest seller certainly is garlic. We also do one of our other big sellers is basil. We do a rosemary oil. We do a number of different kinds of hot oils, different kinds of chili oils, whether it's habanero or jalapeno or a roasted chili. And then the second part of our line is our different vinegars. And again, we make them in that same spirit. We don't add anything unnatural to it. We don't add any sugar to it. We don't add any flavors to our vinegars. They're made from fruit juices. Our maple vinegar is literally made from a fermented maple syrup. It's a recipe that we learned up in Vermont. That's a whole show in and of itself, Jennifer. the woman that taught us
Vermont,
she was
I bet it
today.
is.
It's quite a story, but so we don't do a vast line of vinegars, but the vinegars we do are very, very good, and the chefs really appreciate them. We bring in a couple of different kinds of vinegar from Modena, Italy, so different kinds of balsamic vinegars, and then we do our magic with those vinegars, whether it's a fig balsamic or a cocoa balsamic or a cherry balsamic. And again, we don't use any flavors. We use only the real fruit juices, or in this case, or in the case of cocoa or coffee, we use real espresso, real cocoa nibs, and it makes a real difference. The third category would be our baking essentials. And the headliners of our baking essentials are our pure citrus oils, and they are really unique to the market. And the pure citrus oil is the oil that is pressed right from the rind of the fruit. So, if you take a piece of lemon and you take a lemon rind and you twist it, if you're making a twist to go in your cocktail, you see that little oil that comes to the top of the skin. That's what this is. And what we do is we take lemon rind or orange rind or lime rind, and we press them to extract the oil. And it's done naturally at ambient temperature. We don't use any chemicals to do this. And to give you an idea of how intense this is, to make a 3.5 ounce bottle of lemon oil takes about 300 lemons.
Wow.
The product is extremely intense, and it's extremely pure and clean. So if somebody's looking for a really wonderful lemon aroma or orange aroma, any kind of citrus aroma, they use our citrus oils. And because they're so intense, one doesn't have to use very much of it. And because you can get away with using so little, you don't have to change any the ratios in any recipe, because it's so non-invasive when it comes to how it affects a recipe, except for its flavor and its aroma.
John, before we let you go, because we've only got about 5 minutes left, where do you think we're going as a food world, given the COVID has basically forced us all to put on the brakes? I'm going to imagine you've been very busy because people are ordering products into their home to cook with. Has it been busy for you, or are you seeing a different dynamic?
Well, it's been very busy. We were, I think, and it's funny because I've talked with a number of colleagues who are in the specialty food business, and we've all said the same thing. We were all sort of caught unaware by this. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, all of us saw our restaurant business go away. What we didn't expect, and we were all surprised by, was how robust our retail business became. So whether it's retail products that we sell directly under the Boyajian label, or products that we sell as ingredients to manufacturers who manufacture for retail, the business became really, really robust, to the point where we're doing Christmas numbers and double Christmas numbers.
Wow.
When I say Christmas, I mean Christmas. So that tells me what's happening in our world is that people aren't going to restaurants. They're staying at home. They're watching the Food Network. They're going online. They're looking at recipes, and they're cooking, and that's wonderful. The people have come to appreciate food as something to create and to enjoy, as opposed to something just to eat. And we're seeing it in our business. A lot of my colleagues are seeing it in their businesses, and that's what's happening.
Do you, Michael, have you ever anticipated that where we all go next, as you look in your crystal ball, is going to be that we're going to continue to cook at home?
My crystal ball is saying everyone's going to be going to Boyajian and buying all of their oils and their vinegars and their baking essentials. That's what my crystal ball is saying. But what about those stores? Well, they're closed now. I guess you really can't go. John, all those oil stores, oil and vinegar stores, where they have the big vats of oil and you walk in. Are you familiar? Do they have those up in Boston too? Because they have some here in Vegas.
Well, somebody did one.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah, oil. You talking about the olive oil stores?
Yeah, they're neat, right? They're a little neat. I mean, it's a good way to get educated if they do it right.
Didn't Mary Taylor do that?
Who's that?
It wasn't. Isn't it Mary Taylor?
Oh, I don't know Mary Taylor.
We need to open Boyajian stores like that, Jennifer. That's
it's true.
It's true. You know what we can call it? Get a little drip of John.
We'll work on that. So, John, whatever happened to the lobster business?
So the lobster business went away. This is really interesting. When I started in the lobster business, the American dollar was a very good bargain against European currencies. And by 1980, the dollar became very strong, and people in Europe weren't so interested in buying American lobsters anymore. They liked Canadian lobsters because the Canadian dollar was a lot better, a much better bargain for them. So by the late 1980, we were out of the lobster business and fully entrenched in the caviar business and smoked salmon business.
Yeah.
By the mid 80s, we were packing caviar under our own label and smoking our own salmon. et cetera, et cetera. And just, we really never had a plan. We just kind of went with it. Whatever happened.
That's called organic.
Can I just say, Michael, it's not possible for me to explain to you. When you went to Petrosian and you had the czar cut salmon, that glistening gem jewel flesh that was so just toothsome and
all right. Pull her down, John. Pull her down. All right, come on.
I'm telling you.
It's like watching the movie Up. Let's go. Come on.
As I sail off on
as you sail off. All right, this is beautiful. We love John.
Right?
We love John. Yeah, let's get him back on with some chefs. Let him go at it.
John, talk about some of your favorite chefs who are using your products, even if they're closed temporarily.
Oh, well, unfortunately, everybody's closed today. Some of my favorite chefs. There's a restaurant in San Francisco called Delfina. And I'm embarrassed to tell you I don't know the chef's name, but he uses our stuff, and I love his restaurant. He's over in the Mission District. It's just an amazing restaurant. In Boston, there are too many places to mention. Lydia Shire still uses our product at her restaurant at Scampo.
John, before I let you go, I have to ask you this.
Sure.
What is the most one or two extraordinary dishes in your lifetime of visiting chefs and cooks that used your product and that blew your mind when you tasted how someone imagined your products in a dish that turned out to be so irresistible?
The first thing that comes to mind is Monsef Medeb's foie gras terrine at L'Espalier.
Yeah,
just blew me away. He used our orange oil in his foie gras dish, and you wouldn't have tasted and gone, "Oh, orange." You would have said, "There's a whole other dimension here. What's going on?" And he understood that subtlety.
And it was that kind of expertise and exquisiteness that ultimately led to honors from things like the James Beard Foundation and other organizations. So you are that.
That's right.
And last but not least, I have to ask you about the notion of irresistible. Your products are truly irresistible. They're beyond excellent. And you make them so consistently at that level. How important is that for anybody that's dreaming of going into a food business for the next, whatever next is? How important is that quality message?
I think it's really important. I think, there's a lot of mediocre stuff, whether it's in food or anything else. Mediocrity is pretty easy to come by. I think, understanding what it is that you want to do and doing the best that you can do is really, really important.
Yeah.
It might not be the most economical way of going about things, but if you're doing the right thing, people will see it.
But let me ask you, John, on that right there, what you're saying right there, I'm going to stop you. You're saying it may not be the most economical, but in the end, isn't it truly the most economical? Isn't it if you use higher quality products and ingredients that you use less of it, right? You use less of it, even if it's more expensive, you're using less.
Yep.
And your customers will know the difference. They'll taste the difference. That's one of the things that I had to learn.
And you're absolutely right. And I agree with that. And in the end, that is the most economical. I think a lot of times people can't see it that way. It takes a while to get there.
Yeah.
But when you get there, and quite frankly, in order to get there, you can't just be driven by money. You have to be, you have to be driven by that passion, by that kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing that you did a great job and that people appreciate it and can do something wonderful with it.
Right. And then in the end, there's a great Italian restaurant that I get. The food is unbelievable, right? And they put down on the table oil and vinegar, they put it on the table with the bread and whatever. And the balsamic vinegar is like water, runs all over the whole plate. It's horrendous, right? Everyone's like, "Oh, you got to go to this restaurant."
Yep.
I won't go back because of that. Like, I'm like, where does that come from? Oh, it's in the plastic jug, and it's in the. I asked the guy, what is that oil? I mean, the vinegar. Where does that? Oh, it's in a big jug, and it's in the back. And I'm like, a jug? No, it was in a bucket. It came in a bucket. And I'm like, that's it. That ruined the whole thing for me, because even though they're like, oh, you use too much. You know what? You would use 1/3 the amount if it was good stuff and it was delicious. And I think that, Jennifer, that's what I write about in the book, right? It's like, you can't go there. Even though it's cheaper, it's like using cheap toilet paper. I mean, right? You're using more of it. I don't even know, or Bounty or whatever, or paper towels. You're using more of it, right?
You're absolutely right. I can't argue with anything you said. I totally agree with you. And what's really nice though is that the American public gets it.
Yes.
More and more. They are
more. Yes. More and more. Jennifer, you need to get it now.
I know. I'm working on it. Listen, John, do you remember SS Pierce?
I do. I do remember SS Pierce.
SS Pierce, Michael, was one of the first specialty food companies. And they've gone the way of the dodo bird. And by the way, we need to reload you, John, because as my grandmother, Mrs. Sawyer, would say, because you can't fly on one wing. But SS Pierce was the first specialty company, and they had everything from spirits and their own branded spirits. They curated a certain quality level, and you really had that quality price equation worked out just right. You want to know what I think, John? I think we are ready for another iteration of something like that, where the curated price quality, it'll be above where Trader Joe's is, but it won't be Williams-Sonoma. It'll be somewhere in the middle. And we'll wipe out the Whole Foods on one side. We'll wipe out the Trader Joe's on the other. And I think we're going to end up in this brand new category, this sweet spot of essential things that are just high quality enough at the right price where everyone can eat well and cook well. Right.
I agree. Make it accessible to everybody, to most people. And I agree with you. I think that's a really good point.
I think that's where we're headed.
I'd love to see SS Pierce name come back. Maybe somebody else would have to bring it back, but because I don't think it exists anymore.
But I'll bet you anything. I will bet you $100 right now that if we went to New England and started knocking on doors, we wouldn't have to knock on 100 doors before we found some packaging still in a spice cabinet, still in a liquor cabinet with the SS Pierce label, because that's how we are in New England.
That's right.
I love it.
You're right. Whether it's an old bottle of Madeira wine or an old can of I mean, they even had canned goose foie gras. They had old
or a product used scantily, like a powdered mustard or something.
Right. That's right.
John Boyajian, the website
Thank you, John.
that you share all your goodies with customers is boyajianinc.com. Can we find you still in places like Williams-Sonoma?
No, we're not currently in Williams-Sonoma. Williams-Sonoma has, and I think wisely, done mostly private branded products. Yeah. Their products are pretty much under the Williams-Sonoma label. Or they're under California labels, because that's sort of their identity. But our products are still found in a number of stores, whether it's Whole Foods or Sur La Table or a number of places around the country.
So there you go, Sur La Table. Go in and ask for your and get it. Right?
I'm sorry?
So we'll go to the Sur stores. They actually, by the way, Sur La Table right now, you can get it on Instacart. I can go on Instacart and get. I'm going to do it today. I'm going to get some Boyajian. I am. Yes, I am. That's what I'm going to do.
And when your book comes out later this week.
And my book comes out next week, John. I want to make sure you don't. If you go to Barnes & Noble, you'll be able to see it. If you could get out of the house, there it is. Isn't that gorgeous? That is just gorgeous.
Great.
I don't know what's more gorgeous, that or Jennifer. I'll stick to Jennifer.
John Boyajian, I absolutely love you. It is so making my heart happy to have you here with us. I can't thank you enough for making time to visit with us and to remind us that it will take passion and we all have to strive for excellence.
That's right.
Well,
thank you, John.
so much. My real pleasure. Thank you both.
What a doll baby.
Isn't he the greatest?
He's a doll baby.
He changed the food world in America.
You know what I'm learning right now?
No.
That there's a little thing here that tells me how many people like this and all these reactions, right? And I'm looking and I see a couple of chefs on there. There's a couple of big guys here that are looking at us. Wow. Oh my God. And my mother-in-law. I can't do that. I'm a little more worried about my mother-in-law saying this. Is she still on? How do we know?
Listen, John Boyajian has been my friend a long time.
Nice guy.
You want to know what it takes to be great in this business? You would do far worse than to ignore.
I like the way, listen, the way he did his business is the same way I did mine. I didn't have a goal for Food and Beverage Magazine. My goal was just to be the best, right? And to do the best that I could do and have one person get inspired and innovation. And, it was never like, okay, we're going to have 12 million readers and we're going to rock the world. That's why, look at me, right? I'm not the guy. But we're happy that we're where we are. Don't get me wrong. We're happy that you and I can sit here right now and you against a brick wall. And luckily the warden let you out and to sit against that wall and you could eat baksu all day long. I'm
going to say goodbye and I'm going to go snacking my way. But one of the things about the baksu that I have to point out is, like John Boyajian's products, there are local and regional companies in Japan that have been making the same kind of snack for generations that is so ethereal and magnificent and finessed that you are made lighter and brighter. All right. Come on back down. I'm telling you. All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow or the next day. We don't know yet. Please hug your kids, count your blessings, and eat some food with someone you love.